right, welcome to Lab 8. This walkthrough is going to be a little bit different. We're getting into like some really complex sessions now, or more complex than we have before. We're not just dealing with a few tracks. So for me to do these walkthrough videos, I kind of have to have stuff already sort of set up and routed so that we can get signal in. Which may be a little confusing because there's some steps where I have to show and make active, but they'll already be active in my session. And I just had to do that because of, in order to record these walkthrough videos. So whenever I come along that part of the lab, I'll just make a note of it. So if it doesn't look exactly the same as your session, bear in mind that this is a walkthrough video. So today we're going to do two basic things. We're going to work with a new multitrack. This one's more of a hip hop. It feels like very like Eminem 2000s kind of battle track. I think it's something about standing down or standing up or whatever. Anyway, sorry. I'll try not to be too irreverent about it. This is somebody's music that they allowed us to mix. So anyways, we're going to apply basic compression to individual tracks as well as apply compression to the entire mix. And this is something that you'll probably either have already been doing in your own work or will want to be doing on your projects, especially as we get towards the final project. We're going to use something called the ART method, which will give us kind of an insight into just understanding what the settings are doing in a compressor. You may review the lecture notes from dynamics or compression from this unit and still be a little confused about how to actually operate a compressor. So the ART method that we'll be using, which is an acronym for ARRT, or attack, release, ratio, and threshold. So we'll talk about that. You're going to be turning in one Pro Tools session with the audio files folder, of course, as well as a stereo Redbook bounce, so that 44.1 16-bit. It says a short summary and a written document. It's basically you're just going to do a short summary about what compressors you used and what settings you used, as well as did you apply them to individual tracks or to the entire mix. So there's not a short summary and a written document. Those are the same thing. As always, and per usual, they all need to be zipped in one entire folder, and that's what you share up on Canvas. No real shortcut keys for today. However, we'll probably be using some, and I may mention them. You can download this start file here. This is going to have the whole session and everything you need. Like I mentioned, some things are going to be hidden. So if you're looking over at my session might appear to have other things going on. You can even see, too, I have this other like talkback track that's enabled here that won't be in yours. This is just so that I can actually do the walkthrough. I've hid this in earlier labs just to not confuse you, but I think you're grown enough now. You've done enough labs to just understand that this is the mic input that I'm using. I have it on input monitoring so that I can hear the input of the microphone that I'm using to do this walkthrough. Anyways, the first thing you want to do is when you download that year, month, date, your name, Lab 8, you want to relabel it and do a save copy in. I would just go ahead and do this right off the bat and make sure you save it where you need to, either in your documents folder on your computer or wherever you like to save your sessions that you're working on. Remember, you'll need to zip this whole folder later and drag it into Google Drive or whatever cloud storage you're using to share on Canvas. So yeah, do the save copy session in setting. I will do it real quick so that you can see it. So I'm just going to go up to File and Save Session Copy in. And when I open that up, here's the Save Session Copy window in. You can leave the WAV, 44.1, 24-bit is fine. The big important thing you want to click on is are the audio files here. That's an important thing to click because that will include all the audio files when you save it. So I'll hit cancel. I already saved mine. And I think, mine's called year, month, date, your name, Lab 8, and this is just a finished version. So I've already actually added a lot of the effects and the sends and stuff that we'll be adding later. And I'll kind of work backwards and just show you what I did and how I adjusted the levels. The first thing you want to do, just like in Lab 6, 7, 8, and then now in 9 or in 8 now, and then eventually in 9, there's going to be a reference track. So the cool thing about these multi-tracks that came from the Cambridge Mix Library is that somebody did do a mix. It's not the greatest mix always or the most fantastical. However, it gives us sort of a reference on which way we're going to go. So any of the decisions that you're hearing me make today are based on that reference track. If we listen real quick to that reference track, we can hear it's pretty bumping here. I'm going to go ahead and solo the reference track.
And my heart's racing fast, baby, check my pulse. I be drowning in the world full of swimming pools. Been the hood star boy since the 7th grade. Little rebel from the heart, little renegade.
Yeah, like I mentioned, it goes pretty hard. The track goes pretty hard, but that just gives us a reference of kind of like what the kick is supposed to sound like, what's going on with the snares. Seems like a really kind of punchy kick and some low end, so we can take a look at that. Great. So the first thing we're going to do is some downward compression, and you can actually see the first place I put some of this downward compression was on the actual kick. So if we go ahead and let's listen to the kick, I've got a bunch of plugins on here. Let me go ahead and take them all off. So I'm just command clicking to make these plugins bypassed. And I'll even I think there's some bus action happening in here that I don't need right now. So let's solo that kick. Yeah. So there's that initial kick. If we solo the reference track.
And my heart's racing fast, baby, check my pulse.
Yeah, and then here's our kick. Yeah, it sounds pretty sad. So we got to give it some weight, some low end to make it sound more like the reference track. So one of the things that will be already set up is I did put a trim on the track, and it looks like I put it at -12. Remember, I used my trims just like I did in previous labs to kind of create that static mix like we did in lab 6. So those will all be up there. If you don't like those changes or those settings, feel free to change them if you feel like something's too loud or too quiet. Remember, that's what we do for a static mix. I did use this lo-fi plugin here to add a little bit of distortion. Notice it's not like a ton of distortion. It's just about 0.8, so that anything under 1, you're not really going to it's not going to be obvious like amp or guitar distortion. It's just going to add a little bit more harmonic content to kind of help it stand out. Let's listen to it with and without. Here's without. Here, I'm just going to take the trim off for right now. Here's without, here's with. Without. And with. So you can hear when we add it, it kind of just it's like the kick takes a step closer to us. And that's just because we're adding with a little bit of distortion there. We're adding some harmonic distortion. It's adding these higher harmonics that is just making it feel a little bit closer. There's many different plugins that can do this, a lot of free ones. Maybe you have one in your own native DAW, but this one comes with Pro Tools, quote unquote free, and it's just some distortion. Let's see, as far as some EQ, doesn't look like I cut anything because it's a kick. And it doesn't sound like there's a lot of high end, so I didn't do any subtractive EQ like we did in Lab 7. It looks like I did do some additive EQ. It looks like I boosted it somewhere around 50 hertz, you can see, and then I also boosted it at 400. Looks like I did that harmonic EQ here where I did 50, 100, 200, and 400, so an octave apart from each other. And I guess I just settled on liking to boost 50 and then 400. You could, if you want, engage 100 or 200 if you like that. Let's listen with that. Yeah, here's without that boost. Sounds a little flatter. Yeah, that gives it a little beef. I guess I didn't like 100. Yeah, it gets real boxy. So this kick felt like to me, like if I listened to the reference track, it felt like there was some like mid-high, like 400 and then real low, like 50. And if you don't have a sub or you're using okay headphones, you might not really hear that low end. But great. So I went ahead and added that. That's not part of this lab. I just went ahead and kind of preset that. What is this lab though is the compressor. And so here's without compression. Here's with the compressor. So it's kind of subtle. If you actually look, where have I set my settings? I've actually set my attack to pretty long, 142 milliseconds. I have the release at about 1.1 seconds, so fairly long. The makeup gain is just how much gain I'm adding to the end. I have my threshold set around negative 26 here, and my ratio is only 3:1. So how did I come up with this setting? If you look, it's not that drastic of a difference. Here's without, or here's with, here's without. Yeah, it actually does take a little bit of the low end away, it feels like, but it's just kind of making it more regular. So how did I land on these settings? Well, if you look in this step here of the lab, it talks about using this thing called the ART method, where basically what you're going to do is, and you can do your own settings, when your compressors won't be set already in your lab, they're in mine because I've already finished the lab. But basically, you're going to want to take the four main parameters, attack, release, ratio, and threshold, and set them to sort of these starting positions that you see here, and then you can kind of adjust them from there. So basically, you want your attack anywhere can be. The release will make that as short as possible, so all the way to the left. The ratio we'll put at 100:1, and we'll make the threshold as sensitive as possible. So let's do that real quick and just see how horrible this is going to sound. So let's go ahead. I'll make my attack anywhere. I'll just put it in the center here. I'll make my release as fast as possible. Pull that ratio up to 100:1. And then pull my threshold to as sensitive as possible. Notice I'm not hearing anything, so I'm going to have to work this makeup gain here to get some sound. And you're like, great, Doug. That sounds like absolute trash. Like, you're like, great work. Well, so what we want to do is once we get these settings, yeah, so you might be like, that sounds like absolute trash. But once we get these settings to this initial, what we're going to go through is do one at a time. And remember, it's the ART method. So we're going to do attack, release, ratio, and then threshold. And by the way, we have our makeup gain up at 36 dB. So we're really boosting the level because right now we're really compressing it and we have a really high ratio. So we're going to work that back as we're going. That's kind of the hidden step in the ART method. It should be ART G. So attack, release, ratio, threshold, and gain in between. But let's start with the attack. One thing you can really notice about the attack is if we press play here, I'm going to make the attack as fast as possible. So right now the attack is set to 10 microseconds. So that's super fast. Cool, and you can kind of hear the quality of that. Let me make the attack as short or long as possible. So I'll make it almost 300 milliseconds. Wow, listen to that. Here's as short as possible. Long as possible. So it's pretty clear that when that attack time is longer, it's allowing some of that punch or the intensity, that transient to get through. So a longer attack time is going to allow us to have more punch. Now, this is great for a kick or a snare, right? Where it's all like transient based or all attack based. Might not be good on a vocal or on like a really bright hi-hat or maybe even a guitar. So, you know, it's not one setting for everything, but probably for drums, a longer attack is better. I do want to bring it back a little bit just so that it's not too aggressive. So I'll start bringing it back and let's hear how that sounds. Yeah, so that's too far. I kind of like it at 36, that it still has a little bit of punch, but it's not too out of control. Well, let's adjust our release next. And right now, if we look at our gain reduction, that's showing us basically when the compressor is turning off and on. If we just look at that. Right now, it's just kind of a blinking light. So if we start to slow that release down, notice that gain reduction will kind of slow down and it'll start to groove with the beat a little bit more. See how robotic it seems when it's super fast, but if I kind of slow it down, it starts to groove with the rest of the kit. It's like kick, kick. It's like robotic, which could be cool. That could be cool too. Like you could do that to kind of tweak the drums, but they're going for straight up 2000 hip hop here, so we can slow it down a little bit. Now it's kind of vibing with that snare a little bit here. So after we do that, by the way, we have it to 100-to-1 ratio now here. So let's start bringing that back. We're actually, because we're compressing it like a brick wall limiter here, we're really actually taking some of the punch and character away from the kick. So probably we're going to land around like a 5-to-1 to 3-to-1. And different instruments have typical ratios. But if we start bringing this back, you'll notice that we'll get to a point where the kick will really stand out and be good, and then we'll go too far and it'll get too unruly. So let's take a listen. Feels kind of flat at 11. Ooh, it feels good around 3. Now if we go lower, yeah, see how it just gets too much. So I think 3 is pretty good. Yeah, that feels good. All right, let's bring that threshold back then next. Okay, but now it's compressing like crazy, or clipping like crazy, so let's bring the gain back as well. I'm going to put that trim back on it. Going to bring that gain back a little bit. Yeah, that's nice. Feels pretty good. Here's without. Here's with. Great, so it just brings it closer. It's just giving it a step closer. By the way, I also then, after all of this and then the EQ boost that I did, I also went and added this brick wall limiter. And this is just basically a 100-to-1 ratio. The attack and release times are set. You can adjust the release here, but it's basically just an auto attack time. And then I pulled the threshold down to -11. Let's hear it with and without. Here's without. Here's with. Yeah, it just really brings it out. Here's without. Yeah, it just feels kind of flat. Here's with. Just gives it a whole other character. And by the way, if you're just like, Doug, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I don't understand how you would make these determinations. By the way, I'm also using a drum bus here, so I'll turn that on. You're like, how are you making these determinations? Well, I'm making these determinations based on the reference track. Yeah, those drums sound good now. Here's without all those settings. Right. Here's with. Bring that bass in. Yeah, notice how the bass is kind of just like floating and it's this big thing. So really we're getting that low end punch from the kick. So it's really important. Sometimes in some tracks, it's like there's an 808 kick. So more of the melody is from the bass. But you can see here on the bass track, what we did is instead of using the compressor limiter, we used, or instead of using the Dyne 3 compressor limiter, we used the BF76 sort of analog style compressor, which once again has an attack release, a ratio. And then the difference here is the input is sort of the threshold and the output is our makeup gain. So, All right. As far as other steps, so that's pretty much the art method. So I would go through and do that. It does want you to open some sends here, so you'll need to go through and do that and activate bus 9 and 10. It's also going to want ask you to make a new track called a drum bus, which you're going to make the input of 9 and 10. You can see that here over in the lab. If you look here, I've made the outputs of these tracks. I've sent them to bus 9 and 10. And then here I've made an aux track called the drum bus. I've made its input 9 and 10, and that's just then going out 1 and 2. I know it says bus 23 and 24 here, but that's going out 1 and 2. On that stereo track, I just have some compression. So if we listen to the drums, here's without that compression. Or here's just without it. I'll mute the drum bus so it's a little bit quieter. Here's with. So it's just bringing that even forward even further. So if you think about it, as far as compression goes, we have some downward compression happening here on the track. We have a brick wall limiter on the kick as well as on the snare. And then we have it going out the main output. And then we also have it sending here from bus 9 and 10. We have that going to another track that's summing them all and then compressing them all as well. So quite a bit of compression. Sometimes I hear people say they didn't use much compression on a track or something, and I don't know what they're doing. That never makes any sense to me. Maybe they didn't add it and the mix engineer did, or the mastering engineer, or I don't know. I don't understand. I use very little compression. Like they'll say that a lot of times on vocals, like I had to use very little compression on their vocals. And I'm just kind of like, all right, but the mix engineer did, right? Anyways, or what's not a lot? I don't know. Maybe they didn't need to use 3, right? All right, let's not turn this into a Reddit rant post here in walkthrough form. So after you've created that drum bus, like I said, I put that BF76 compressor on it, and I set the inputs to what you have here. I turned that input all the way up, so that means that threshold is all the way down. So this is really kind of an aggressive compressor, but often you can do that on a drum bus to kind of really make the drums stand out. All right. The next thing is there's a group vocal. So on the drums, we set up a parallel compression path. On the Vox track, we're going to set up a group compression. So if you come over here to the group vocal tracks, if you'll notice, I basically have these vocals now, if we want to solo them.
Back down, y'all don't really wanna fuck with me. Nah, back down, get too close, homie, you will see. You will see. Back down, I ain't faking, homie, this is me. This is back me. Down, begging you, please leave me be.
So what's kind of cool here is I actually have the output of the track, instead of it going out 1 and 2, I have them directly going to bus 7 and 8. And if you notice now, I have this aux track over here that is, the input is set to bus 7. So if you look at this track now, the EQ and compression settings that are on here, as well as the limiter, they're getting all the tracks here, these blue ones, all these vocal tracks are getting compressed in the same way. I do have like some lo-fi, so a little bit of distortion and a little different trim settings on each track. Like for some of the backups, I think the ad-libs, I have them a little bit quieter. But the whole point here is all of these vocals, so I have like 6 vocal tracks, which you'll often have, especially in hip hop. They'll like do a single, double, triple, ad libs, basically stack the vocals. And so you don't want to have to go through and compress each one. You could go in EQ and compress each individual one, but usually what you do is you bus them. So you hard bus them. So I don't even let them go to the main output. I just send their 100% of their signal to this bus, and then I compress that bus. If you notice, I'm also sending them to a little bit of delay as well. That's something we'll talk about in the next lab, where we talk about time-based effects and how we'll set them up via send and returns. So yeah, after you've done that, you will, by the way, to make the delay track active here that I have, you'll have to show and make active. So you can do that within the session by just going over to the right-hand side here. I'll hide the delay track. So here's the hide delay track. I'm going to hide it and make it inactive. So you notice how I don't see it in my mix window right now, and it's inactive. If I look over here on my left side though, do you notice it's showing the delay track, but it's kind of like italicized and there's no dot. So that means it's not being shown and it's not active. So if I right click on it and say show and make active, boom, it becomes unitalicized. It shows up on the track list on the left-hand side. And now if we look in my mix window, it's now active and running. And on that track, I just put a little bit of delay. In Lab 9, we'll definitely talk about delay and delay settings as well as reverb. That'll be an important part of the lab. Great. The last thing you might want to do is some stereo bus compression. So that's really just putting a compressor on the main output or on your master fader. I already have that all set up on mine. So if you look here at my master fader, notice I have this L1 Ultra Maximizer. By the way, you probably won't have this Waves plugin on your computer. So instead, what you can do is just use the Maxim plugin. I'm not going to change the settings on this right now just because that's affecting the walkthrough output, but I can go and do that real quick. Let me just go to multi-channel plugin, and instead of the L1, I'm just going to use the plugin called Maxim, which is Pro Tools like version of the same thing. So if you notice, I'm going to start, let me put the out ceiling at -1. By the way, this is just a brick wall limiter, meaning it has a really, really high ratio. The attack is set, the release you can adjust. And as I bring this threshold down, look what's going to happen. Check, 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 check. It just keeps getting louder and louder and almost kind of distorted. So you want to be careful with that. But what you can do now is when you finish a mix, you can do this to the entire mix. So great. There we go with that. The only other steps in the lab are to go ahead and do a short write-up. You just want to talk about what compressors you used on what track. What was your order? Did you do EQ and compression? And then what did you use on the stereo bus? Some people just use the BF76 or the analog compressor on there. Some people use Maxim. So just, a short write-up of what you did. And that can just be in a text file or a Word file or whatever, and just zip that all up with everything else. It is going to ask you to bounce your mix. So you will need to go to the bounce mix. Going to want to make sure it's wave. Make sure your output is output 1 and 2. I had some people in a previous lab. Sometimes this output source can default to somewhere else. Let me actually just bounce it real quick in here. So I'm doing Command Option B to bounce. And look at, I have it going output 1 and 2, so it'll hear everything that we hear. But you can change it to anything. You could just change it to like a bus output or something. And sometimes these get reset or they follow somebody else's settings that they had. So you always just want to make sure it's going out 1 and 2. If it's not going out 1 and 2, when you bounce, you might just bounce silence. So make sure it's interleaved. You want to make it 16-bit. And then as always, choose the directory. Right now it's going to my desktop, but I'll want to just let me go to my desktop here. I think I have it somewhere else in another folder. So let me just navigate to there. I think I have it under teaching, Northeastern, what is this, Summer 1, 2025. NPR1 labs, lab 8. Is that deep enough there in the file structure? And then I want to put it in that bounce folder. Otherwise, it would have just bounced it to the desktop and it wouldn't have shown up here. And so when I went to go and zip this folder, the bounce file would have been somewhere else. All right, well, that's pretty much the lab. As always, make sure you zip everything in one folder, put it on Google or whatever cloud storage you use, and make sure anyone with the link can edit or view, and then share that link on Canvas. So that's Lab 8. Really, if you think about it, the walkthrough wasn't that involved, but it's really the crux of the lab is going through each track and really kind of deciding what kind of compression settings you want. And I hope the art method is helpful because it'll kind of give you a way to sort of hear what's actually happening when you're adjusting these settings. And by kind of overdoing it or setting the compressor to sort of like kill, you can really hear what it's doing, and you'll get more comfortable with like what are the parameters doing, like what does attack do, what does release, what does ratio, and what does threshold do.